Welcome back to the Mariner. Thank you very much for all the comments that you've been putting in. We talked a little bit about hydrodynamics last time and whether the bottom of the boat should be rough like a shark or smooth like a marlin or a tuna. Lots of great comments backwards and forwards. I love hearing the inputs, but let's keep in mind that a marlin or something like that can do bursts of speed between 40 and 60 knots, where something like a great white shark is going to be top speeds much closer to what this boat can do. We're talking about a vessel which is kind of bluff compared to some of the more hydrodynamically smoothed out creatures that are in the sea, and so it has a lot more similarity with these kind of size of appendages going at this kind of speed, which is where I think this rough surface comes into its own, giving a nice turbulent boundary layer between the bottom of the boat and the water, which then reduces that pressure drag from the boat passing through the water and the water trying to form back together again. But I love hearing people's comments on this stuff. To be able to like sit down in the evening and have a look at your comments and like think about this stuff is obviously something I've been excited about for decades. So thank you very much for the opportunity. So the bottom of the boat now completely done. We've got a little bit of taping to do back here. I'm not going to get into it. I basically ended up running out of black antifoul about that much away from being done, which you know is very, very irritating. And this kind of antifoul, this is Micron CSC. It's about $440 a gallon, which if you know antifoul, you realize it's kind of mid-range. What I don't want though is to go and take the top off a gallon and then have the gallon sealed inside the boat for X amount of time till the next done. So I'm trying to see if there's a little bit of antifoul like somewhere around the yard. I can just boop, boop, finish up that last bit and not have to get into having that kind of like risk factor of the paint sitting inside the boat. I've already got to do that with a tub of red, which only did these bits and will be good on board for another 3 years. I'd like to point out the work site that I've been working with underneath here. It's a bit kind of like clunky because I have to cover up for the couple of times it's been raining, but look how clean the work site is. I think this is definitely something, if you're going into the boatyard and you have had the experience of like spending much more time there than you're expecting, and it starts getting much more expensive than you're expecting and prices start to rack up. It's one of the reasons I leave the sails on deck for this. This is like a week to turn around, right? It's more of a, it's why people cut the toothbrushes off the back of their boat, It's why people cut the back off their toothbrushes when they're racing, not because the lightness of the toothbrush is important, but the philosophy every time you pick the toothbrush up that this is all about speed. That's one particular kind of like mental track that people go down, not my style, but coming into the boatyard, remembering we have got to leave here as soon as possible is very, very important. And I do that also by keeping the work site clean and tidy, and I'll pick up trash which was on the ground before I got here, so that by the time I leave, it's better than when I got here. So it's much easier then to pick up the pieces and leave and go back to sea, which is what we're meant to be doing. So got the repair done on the side of the keel there. I just went in and did spot repairs. Took the top off the blisters that were there. Remember there was the water blisters from my poor preparation. People saying using a heat torch or using methyl hydrate. Absolutely. Just whatever you do, you've got to do it so that the water actually disappears. Otherwise, you put paint over water, it's going to bubble out as we see. But I did spot repairs on those, so I didn't want to get into opening. I had got to the bottom of my Interprotect 2000 gallon when I did all this stuff. And again, I'd be opening a gallon of Interprotect just to like put on a couple of spoonfuls of it. It's so silly. So, okay, we're up here on the back of the boat and things still looking clean and tidy. I'm going to swap out that paint that we got for the stripes for white, and we'll do the inside of this cockpit. It's going to look a lot better. But let's have a look inside here, where some very important work has been going on over the last couple of days, concurrent with what I've been doing on the bottom of the hull. So here we can see the top of the giant aluminum frame that runs up the center of the boat like a spine here, concludes on this bulkhead, and then has webs that go out and connects onto the massive bulkheads you see here going through the boat, not least up to this area, which is where the chain plates are, up inside there, right? So an area that will be getting a seal on this time when we actually get the escutcheon plates properly secured. Down inside the boat here we can see these massive They are M42 bolts. They're like 1.25 inches or so in diameter. 4.5 mil, like 1/4 inch, something like that pitch, the distance between the top of the each thread. And they have a standard torque requirement of about 800 foot-pounds, which is getting up there. So you can see in this footage that was captured when Nathan, the excellent engineer from Portland Yacht Services, came on board to do this. He used a force multiplier, which that tool there, I'll just circle here, that tool is multiplying the input force from his torque wrench 4 times up. So he's got 200 foot-pounds on the torque wrench, and there's 800 foot-pounds coming out to the nuts on the keel bolts. So what we can then do in this situation is we can kind of like make a very intelligent guess as to what tension these are going to be at. Stainless steel will have a torque setting of about 800 foot-pounds. Monol stainless steel in that same bracket. So what we're able to do is bring on the torque wrench at 800 foot-pounds and just start turning, and actually we got the nuts to start turning them, which means that they were less than the standard torque setting for these bolts. They looked like there was about 20 odd degrees of movement on the nut before they then clicked out on the torque wrench, and we had 800 foot-pounds via the force multiplier. What I was able to do with AI, which we hear so much talk about AI, but let's talk about outcomes, and later on I can teach about the method that's done it. I've got AI helping me a lot with all the admin of dealing with this boat. So we can see on this nut here some of the information we were able to give to ChatGPT to look at this situation. You see the 2 black marks, one on the tip and one on the flat of the nut. Those 2 black marks were together when the torque was applied initially, and the nut moved by about 20 odd degrees to come up with that setting. What I was able to then do is input the spec of the bolt, M42 by 4.5 mil, and then give it images, ChatGPT images of that, and it was able to tell me that the nuts on the keel bolts were at about 650 foot-pounds previously, and then that small movement brought them up to 800 foot-pounds. So that 20 odd degree movement there on the side of the nut increased the torque of the bolts by 150 foot-pounds. Now interestingly over here, once we go into this area where you can see there's multiple bolts all here, this is the front of the keel plate, all of the nuts have got these massive stainless washers on here, right? Well, these ones had to be bought in because we found that 2 of the keel bolts had plastic washers on. And this kind of plastic washer, if you're going to start putting serious torque on it, look what it does to it, just squeezes it out. So 2 of the keel bolts had basically no pressure on them and plastic washers in. And what we realized was that when they were bringing the keel and the canoe body of the boat together, these would have been the ones that drew the 2 pieces together, and these were put on so that the nuts wouldn't gall onto the keel bolts. Galling is when you get thermal welding between the nut and the bolt, and it can leave you, well, I don't know exactly what you'd do in this situation, how exactly you'd cut an M42 nut, stainless steel or nitronic those nuts might be, out of the bolt, I have no idea. So these were put on to draw the 2 pieces together, but then they were left on somehow, and we had 2 of our 25 keel bolts were at no pressure at all. If 22 degrees movement on the nut is equal to 150 foot-pounds, plastic washers equal probably just a couple of £100 on those. So Nathan ordered up the new stainless steel washers like this guy. They got put in, and if we look for an extra little detail here, we've got Duralac on this these nuts. You see the yellow paste that's sticking out of there? That is a mating compound that then allows 2 dissimilar metals, in this case stainless steel and aluminum, to be alongside each other without huge galvanic action. Otherwise you'll find that things start to fizz, start to oxidize, and when that happens the oxide is at least 10 times the volume of the metal it's being made from. And if that's occurring inside a thread or in some kind of interference fit between an alloy and a stainless item on the boat, then they will pack out to the point where you can't move things, and metal actually start to split. So got the mating compound on there, and then we've got a whole keel head now torqued up to 800 foot-pounds, and feeling pretty good about it. So what else has been going on? Well, I guess the other thing we should talk about is the mainsail. The mainsail is something that I've been working on for quite a while with this boat. It's been happening quietly over in Italy with the guys from Olympic Sails, and literally it was only yesterday that I sent the second payment to them, which comes at the beginning of production, after a lot of details have been passed back and forwards between myself and Emmanuel, who's the sailmaker who's helped me with that sail. So let's go over to the mast. We'll have a look a little bit what's going on there. That's going to be my focus for the next couple of days before we launch, and we can talk about the mainsail as well. Okay, now the other thing I got to tell you is that I've been working on other ways of bringing you the experience of being on the boat and doing these things I'm doing. So in the last couple of days I picked up a couple of drones from Facebook Marketplace, and the idea is to get out on the water and then show you that exterior view. I'm not really like interested in a shot of another wave going over the bow. There's far too many of those from the Volvo race and everything else, but it's just about getting that like situational awareness. So if we're doing a 360 video, that's good, but for a lot of people it's still kind of like alien tech. I think if we can get the drone and we can have a chat and then fly up and fly around, and then realize that when I'm looking into the camera and chatting to you, behind the camera there's no humans anywhere. So trying to do what I can to show you guys a fair representation for the first time of what it is to be at sea and go sailing in this manner. All right, so here we go. Here's our mast. We've not talked about this very much since we've been down, because in my mind I've been very focused on the boat and the keel, which is correct because that was the main focus of what I'm doing here. But here's our mast, 120 foot long, this mast, massive carbon fiber structure. And I did get connected to somebody who was involved in the original rigging team that put this together, and he was very, very complimentary about the strength of this mast. And again, there would only be 8 of these masts made for the 8 Grand Mistral. So if you have any experience of these masts or masts like this, I'd love to hear from you, because we've got a few things to work out before this mast goes back up in the boat. But as we get to the very top here, we can see, I was measuring things the other day, we've got a little bit of damage to look at. We've got this damage here, the side of the sheath. We've got the stopper on the top of the mainsail track is blown off. And that seems to be because the previous mainsail, I did have it backwards and forwards a bit with the sailmaker, where he was telling me that the maximum hoist was 31 meters, 250 millimeters, 31,250 millimeters, 31.25 meters. And that would take us to a point where the headboard of the car would be like off the track, which is clearly what's happened here before. So did some very careful measuring to make sure we came up with an amount that would give us at least 1.5% error, like allowance here for stretch and manufacturing defects and stuff like that. So when the sail goes on, I would rather it was like, you know, a little down from the top of the mast and not blowing my hardware apart. Much better for me. Okay, so the task we're going to be doing really is looking at the top here. We've got this situation, like self-tacking. This is all damage from the ospreys that come and sit on this boat when we are in Nova Scotia, and also around here. I've seen lots of them here. But we've got damage to our wind instruments. The first antenna's off, the second antenna's off. The anchor light is being misused as a tricolor light there. We've got to get that fixed back in. We've got this massive crane which has no stay attached to it. There's no Windex and there's no active echo. So apart from that, we're doing fine. So lots of masthead work, and if I just got that done, I'd be very, very happy. Plus we have, let's lose this thing here. What we have here is an interesting example. What can you tell me about that sheath? What can you tell me about that sheath? That's today's question. Maybe I'll get you a closer look. So what is that sheath for? There are a couple of different sheath types. There's ones which are specially shaped for rope. There are some that are specially shaped for wire. And there's another kind of sheath that you'll get on this kind of boat from this kind of period that is shaped for, you tell me in the comments what that flat shape inside that pulley, what it's shaped for. That needs to change, and we need to think what we're going to be using this for. At the moment, this boat has no tip stay. So if we look at this beautiful boat that's pulled in over here, which actually in hull form is very similar to, you see it's got this slightly fractional rig. It's not quite 7/8, it's probably like, I don't know, 15/16. It's pretty damn close to the top. But by pulling on the backstay, it can induce bend and flatten the mainsail off and increase forestay tension, because the forestay and the top of the mast are quite close together. On this boat, there's 15-foot difference between the forestay here and this crane position here. So when we pull on our tipstay, if we had one, we could really bend this mast. See how there's not much sweep on the spreaders. We can get it into quite a performance position and bend the mainsail. However, I don't know what's been going on with this boat, but the rigging setup on this boat, there was no tension at all on the D's, on the diagonal rigging. The diagonal rigging is there to help the mast resist bending, and that's been a big problem for us. This mast is permanently bent. Look how slack the D's are. Permanently bent like a banana all the time. And what it means is that once you get the mast to curve like this, and then you start putting more backstay tension on, and it's pulling against that fractional forestay, you just bend the mast more and more, and then it's like having a spring underneath your rigging, and the situation starts to become much more complex in terms of getting forestay tension, because every time you put more backstay tension on, it doesn't pull across a incompressible strut in the mast. It pulls across something that's bending and curving like an archer's bow, and you never get proper forestay tension. Now, if anybody's wondering, we are going to get rid of this orange. Our ongoing fight to get rid of the orange. She's looking pretty good from afar over here, right, with the orange lines on, but it will be better when we change to a decent coat of epoxy paint. This will just be white, and we'll touch this in while we're here. Let's have a look at the spinnaker halyards. We can see here where the spinnaker halyard comes out of an internal sheath. We can see the shape of these sheaths. See how they're quite curved? Okay, so that's meant for, it'd been meant for original kind of style rope. In 1997, Spectra was still, and Dyneema was still in the cutting edge of what was going on, and so this probably would have been very large polyester and nylon ropes, or Kevlar core and then polyester, which is a bit of a hint for the other one. But what we've got here is a different kind of problem that we've got to deal with. We've got appropriately sized rope in the correct size sheath and shape sheath, but it comes out of the sheath and goes through this spectacle block here, which then, what it does is it separates the movement of the kite from its waggling left and right, port and starboard, and the lifting requirements of the structure to get the sail into the air and hold the sail in the air. So we don't have halyards going up to sheath boxes like this and then cutting themselves as they waggle left and right. We separate this bit here, which is lifting the sail up, and then this articulation here, which gives us the movement we need without damage. But look, there's this. So what this should be is that the halyard should go down, double over, and come back up and be connected here, and then we get 2-to-1 halyards. And 2-to-1 halyards means that the weight of the sail and the force of the sail is being divided in two when it goes back down the sheave here and back down the mast, which means that the compression on the mast, another big factor that's not helping when we've got a mast that's in a kind of bowed archer's bow kind of shape, rather than being an incompressible strut. The compression from the spinnaker halyard and from the main halyard, which is 1-to-1, also pulling that spar into a bend and making things much worse. And you get this weird pumping kind of hollowness to the forestay, which you can never get proper tension on. We can see how massively the mast has been built in here, and this yellow tells us there's Kevlar reinforcement in these areas. Our forestay here. Now all of these connections for this nitronic rigging need to be lubricated. We'll be doing that. And then I didn't mention this line, you saw this, right? It's stuck down the side of here. Well, that happened in an accident a couple of years ago. For the first time, it got pulled out and then popped its way back in recently. This just needs cutting off. This was just here as like a rope access to the top of the mast, because if the mainsail's in use and you need to get up here, there's no other thing here to get up apart from this at the top of the mast. But I do need to talk to Bruce Farr, or Bruce Farr's office, and the rig manufacturers, and find out what we can put on this mast, because a big masthead high-shouldered VMG downwind kite would be quite the resource. So we got to clean our nitronic rigging. Now, the nitronic rigging on this boat, at estimate, is 220 kilos, so it's about 450, 500 pounds. What I'm looking for, this stuff is PBO. This is Xylon rigging. It's flexible Kevlar-based, or Kevlar-like based rigging. Also carbon rigging. This boat over here, we'll get closer later on, it's got carbon rigging on it. Very, very strong, very, very, well, extremely low stretch, and also the weight. When we get a kilo out of this location, this high up, it's equivalent to having 5 kilos added to the keel. So if we can get 150 kilos out of the rigging here, we get 750 back on the bottom of the boat to use for stiffening the boat up. So that's coming in time, but we got to get there in little steps, because to re-rig this boat, to put new backstays and new rigging on this boat, you're probably cruising around 85,000 US dollars. So what I want to do is, well, to replace it then with PBO. If we went to carbon, it would probably more again, but the performance benefits for an upwind boat is phenomenal. Oh, upwind. Okay, so in the last one I said you can't go upwind in at more than 10 knots, which is absolutely true. It's absolutely true for boats that can actually punch to windward in heavy sea states, in high winds. You'll see numbers for open 60s and Volvo 70s and things like that. It's like, oh, 13, 14 knots to windward. Yeah, you can, but when the seas start to get really, really rough and you're starting to leap out of them, if you start going much more than 10 knots, firstly, the bow is so proud of the wave when it comes out that it actually gets pushed down to leeward by the breeze, and you start to kind of lose traction there. Also, the speed that you're going over the waves, it gets to a point where there is so much stress on the rigging that as yet I have never seen a setup which I could trust long term. I'm talking like hundreds of days going upwind, that could take that kind of hammer of going off massive waves and coming down and stressing the rig. You could do it, but you'd be constantly getting nervous about how much stress is on the rig and what is the disadvantage for performance. At 10 knots upwind, you can kind of wiggle your way around the top of the waves. You can find your way down the back of the waves and avoid too much slowdown at the bottom of the wave. And you can keep the boat moving forward without it leaping clear of the waves and you being worried about physical damage to the people, physical damage to the boat, and a performance disadvantage. So in flat water, yes, you can go upwind faster than 10 knots, but the kind of sailing this boat's doing, the kind of sailing that we're focusing on, which is upwind performance for what we want to do, 10 knots is what you want to look at as being your number for going upwind. And then by the time we look at that as a VMG, we've probably got about 7.8, 7.9 VMG, which is what Jean-Luc Vandenheet had as his average VMG for the 27,000 miles around the world that he did for the Westabout solo non-stop record. So it's better to focus on being very, very good at 10 knots and being realistic with that, than dreaming about 11.5, 12 knots upwind, which isn't going to happen when the shit hits the fan in the Southern Ocean. So 10 knots is how fast you can go upwind. So Monday, Mast goes in, website's ready, 5 reef mainsail is on order. We've got 25 keel bolts torqued up to 800 foot-pounds, and we've got 99% of our antifoul done. I'd say we're looking in good form. So unlike most of my videos, which seem to cut off prematurely, I'll just say, thank you very much for watching. I hope wherever you are and whatever you're doing, you're safe and sound. Thank you for all your comments, and please consider subscribing or joining the YouTube membership or indeed the Patreon when I've got that sorted out. And I'll speak to you in the next one. Cheers.